You can't trust your 5G. Can't trust your network. Your network's always dropping off. Hopefully it works. Oh, I need a beer. Oh, look at that. There's a Monte Carlo racing beer. That's kind of cool. G'day. Thanks for joining. This is about as organised as the remote ones get, because I set stuff up on the iPhone and I want to do it vertical, and I'm like, no, my eyes go this way. I want to do horizontal, and then I got to get the microphone working, and then I keep continuously dropping off the network to the point where I feel like I've got to have my iPad here just to watch myself so that I know when it no longer works. So if you've made it this far, thank you for your patience. I am in Monaco. I'll talk about that soon. I'll talk about how I got here and what the whole sort of path to arriving in Monaco was, because it's exceedingly cool, and I'm glad we've only got a few days here, if I'm completely honest. Let me start with the melody bits. Sponsor this week is 1Password. Okay, right, cool. There's someone here. The game is over. Whoop, whoop, live for once. Thank you. I know it's working now. Unless that was... Nah, it's probably live. Sponsor is 1Password. Needs no introduction, of course. Really, really cool to be here, looking down at the racetrack where the Red Bull cars with the 1Password logo on them now go past. We're literally on top of that, like, massively crazy, iconic racetrack. Back to 1Password. What are we talking about in 1Password this week? I just went and loaded. There is actually a dedicated 1Password Troy Hunt link, 1password.com/Troy Hunt. Did I say Troy Hunt? Oh, that was an absolute Freudian slip. There is a dedicated /Troy Hunt link after 1Password. So 1password.com. Go and check that out. 1Password needs, for the most part, no introduction. I think we're now at about 14 years, 2011? Would have been 2011. 14 years relationship with 1Password. Their sponsorships on my blog not only talk about 1Password Extended Access Management, which of course came from the Collide acquisition, secure every sign-in for every app on every device. There is a link there through to the /Troy Hunt. Now, I am seeing some news here about Trellica by 1Password. That is something I'm going to have to catch up on. That wasn't there last time I did this video, but we will catch up to that. Modern access governance is complex. This is true. We'll talk about some of the places that's gone wrong just lately. Uncover shadow IT and AI. When I was at Pfizer, shadow IT used to be someone in the marketing department using Microsoft Access to do their job. And our life was spent chasing Microsoft Access databases and trying to make sure there was actually nothing important put in them. And managing the SaaS lifecycle and eliminating unnecessary spend. Please go and check out 1Password on that special link, 1password.com/Troy Hunt. And catch up on all the good stuff they're doing. And I hope one day I get an invite to come back here and watch their cars. The cars with their logo run around. Lots of people here. G'day from the UK. This is Dave from a sunny UK. As soon as I read that, I was like, nah. And then Dave says, no, it won't last. Brendan's there from back in Australia. Ben Hot Minute. Dale. Anyone else getting audio static, or is it my dodgy YouTube app? Geez, I hope not. Because I can basically do stuff all about it. I have an external shotgun mic that I use every time on this live stream, which is fine. So yeah, hopefully that cleans up a little bit. I do wonder if it might also be a little bit related to, is it dodgy connection? Are they compressing it? I don't know. We'll see. I'll listen to it later. Sorry guys, there's nothing more I can do about the moment. Kieran is there. Dave says audio is a bit scratchy. Look, bear with me. I don't think it's going to be particularly long today anyway, because I've been too busy to have too much new stuff to talk about. But that said, let me talk about this lovely Monte Carlo beer, racing beer, that literally has a little F1 car on it, which is nice. Um, I did this video before I left Australia. I did it on a Thursday. I did it a little bit early. We are at time recording about 5:30 in the afternoon in Monaco on a Friday, and we left Australia the afternoon that I recorded. Went to Dubai. Had a couple of days in Dubai. Did do a little bit of cyber stuff in Dubai with an organisation we may be doing some work with. I might hold that over to a little bit later. Acclimatised a little bit. Now, for those of you from other parts of the world and you're wondering how far away everything is, it takes us 14 and a half hours to get from Brisbane to Dubai. Now, that's 2/3 of the way to Europe, but you're still not all the way there. So, we get over to Dubai, chill out there for a couple of days, do some cyber things. Flew to Munich. And after we got to Munich, I've been speaking about this trip for a while. So I'd said before, we had hired an SL63 AMG Mercedes, which I thought would be a nice car for driving on the autobahns and also doing about 3,500 kilometres around Alpine roads and all sorts of things. And then we got there, and as often happens when you hire a car, they're like, hey, would you like this other thing instead? We have it, but would you like the other thing instead? And they said, we've got a 911. And I was like, well, I thought about that, but I was worried about being able to fit bags in. And they're like, well, we've got a 911 GTS, which is a bit faster than a normal 911. I think it's Munich, it's autobahns. Tell you what, if the bags fit, we'll take that one. So that's what we end up with. I put a lot of photos on Facebook. That seems to be where most people are these days. Most consistently are. So anyway, we got this car. We got onto the autobahns. It was fun. So there's a video on Facebook. Had a fun drive down the autobahns of Munich over to Liechtenstein. Now this would have been Sunday. Now from then on, everything has been a little bit of a blur of different events. And a lot of what we're doing here is catching up with the various governments that I've publicly talked about before that are using Have I Been Pwned, and trying to do as many public events as we can as well. So Monday morning, Liechtenstein CERN, so we caught up with them. In case you never heard of Liechtenstein as well, it's a tiny little country at the bottom of Germany, in the Austria, Switzerland kind of region. It's, what do we figure out? There's like 40,000 people that live there in the entire country. It's very small, it's very cool, it's up there in the Alps. So anyway, caught up with the CERT there. That afternoon, drove down to Zurich. We did an Azure user group in Zurich, so had a really good event there with the folks. The next day, drove to Bern, caught up with the Swiss CERT in Bern, who I'd last seen in Bern in 2019, so it was a little bit of going back and seeing the same folks. Then went to CERN in Geneva, who we'd also seen in 2019. Now, in case CERN is an unfamiliar term, there are a couple of really, really cool things about CERN. And one of the really, really cool things is that is where Tim Berners-Lee wrote the original spec for the World Wide Web. It's effectively where the World Wide Web was born. So to go back to CERN and then do a talk at CERN as well, and it was super cool. It was just a packed out room talking about how this wonderful vision of the World Wide Web has some problems of late. So did that. Got another tour. Last time we were there in 2019. Oh, that was, the two cool things. So Tim Berners-Lee, World Wide Web. The other super cool thing is the Hadron Collider, the world's largest machine. And this world's largest machine, I think from memory, the stats are, it's a particle collider. I'm just going to assume you all know how that works, like I do. It's a particle collider, which is a big circular track, I think from memory about 26 kilometres long. Big circular track goes through the mountains of France and Switzerland. And they just blast particles around there as fast as possible, such that they do, of this, I know the number's going to be wrong, but let's say it's a 26 kilometre track. The particles circulate the 26 kilometre track 11,000 times a second. Imagine that, like very, very, very close to the speed of light. So last time we were there, that was under maintenance. We went down in this great big sort of shaft and had a look at just like an unfathomably difficult to comprehend machine. Apparently this time it was actually busy colliding particles, so we didn't go and see that. We saw the antimatter factory, We had an absolutely wonderful physicist as part of the group who was there who explained things that go far beyond my comprehension. But it was something to the effect of when the universe was created, it created a bunch of matter, but because everything needs to balance out, it also created antimatter. And now in this factory, they create antimatter. And you just look down at the equipment and you're just like, you know, like if you go to a manufacturing plant, you go to somewhere that makes cars, you can look at a lot of the machines and you go, I got a rough idea how that works. You know, like they're beating a panel into shape or they're soldering electricals or something. You go to an antimatter factory and you look down and you're just like, I don't know, mate, there's a lot of cables. Where do you even begin to debug that if you need to? A lot of magnets. Well, that's about the limit of my understanding. Lots of magnets and lots of cables. But it's just a fascinating, inconceivably complex topic that our guide on the day just did the most wonderful job of passionately explaining. So CERN is special. It's amazing. A few other cool things about CERN. So they're on the border of Switzerland and France. And as you're walking around the premises, you're constantly going between Switzerland and France. And my understanding of it, and I'll probably get this technically wrong again, is that they're not an independent country, but they effectively are an independent entity that is funded by the people of Europe. They're, I think the correct term is a nuclear research agency, but most of what they do is like fundamental physics. You don't have a Swiss or a French police presence. They're like an internal police, there's an internal fire brigade. And then at various points around the campus, we showed at one point that there's like a stone, which is like, okay, well, this marks the border. And in this particular case, I think it was Switzerland came down to a bit of a point. And the guy was saying, you know, have a look at where that line goes from the stone and have a look at the building, where the building should have had an angle like this, but in order to still be within one, and it just looks like a normal manufacturing site, in order to still be in, as normal as manufacturing antimatter can be, in order to still be in one country, the building, instead of having an angle that goes like that, will go out and then it comes in and then it goes out like that again. And it's almost like a slice is taken off the corner of the building to keep it, I think in that case, in Switzerland instead of France. It's just mind-blowing. Richard's here. G'day, Richard. Richard could explain antimatter. Certainly much better than me. So that was CERN, and we went from CERN to a French village called Annecy and spent a night there. Then went to Lyon the next day in France, and it was, I forget the proper French term, but did an event there organised by effectively like the student hospital that then got a whole bunch of different people from other industries playing CISO or CERT style roles into the event, and we had a great event there in Annecy, in Lyon. So that was the last event we did there. Went to Gordes. Even French people disagree on how to pronounce this. Gordes. Apparently one of the most beautiful villages in the world, which was kind of cool. It's like on top of a mountain and there's castles and old buildings and a really cool hotel with an epic swimming pool. So we spent time hanging out there. Yesterday came to Monaco and it's cool here. It's exceedingly, I don't know, like how can you explain it? We're seeing nice cars, so I'm happy. Not just that one. Seeing lots of nice cars. We're staying sort of right in the centre, near the casino. Stefan's here as well. Stefan's been helping. We'll talk about what Stefan's been building today, and Charlotte and I have been sitting around the pool, troubleshooting, testing. So came here. It's bizarre. It is a bizarre little place, and it's partly bizarre because in all honesty, it's not pretty. You know, there are lots of places in the world you can go to where it's like, wow, this is just a really pretty place. Some of the French places we're just staying, really pretty, or some place with beautiful sort of water and scenery. And here you've got a small strip of land with hills right behind it. And frankly, looking around, like a lot of kind of older, shittier apartments and things like that as well. But then you've got this exceeding display of wealth all in this one little central area between the hotel we're at and the casino next to it, and just supercar after supercar after supercar going through, which is kind of wild. It is non-stop Ferraris and Lambos mostly. Got here a couple of McLarens out the front of the casino. That made me happy. That looked nice. I think the best stuff we've seen, we went out for dinner last night and came out past the casino, and you'd get particularly like young guys. When I say young guys, are probably teenagers, almost like setting up camp there just to take photos of all the cars that are coming past. And I think the best things we saw was it's all the usual like Avented or SVJs and things like that, but there was like an original 1950s era gull-wing Mercedes. It was just immaculate in black, parked outside the hotel, and it was. I don't really want classic cars, but that was mind-blowingly cool. So very, very happy with that. I'm hoping to see some more exotic stuff. We'll see. Some of the exotic stuff we don't get home. Where are the Bugattis and the Paganis and the Koenigseggs? So we'll see. Apparently a lot of Formula One drivers live here because there's no tax. Not sure how they pay for everything, but then again, there's no tax in Dubai either, no personal tax. And it's very, very central. But man, it is like an overwhelmingly intense place. It is so busy. So I think a few days here, which is what we'll have, will be good. Before we go on to the next things, I do have a public event in Rome next week as well. On my blog, there's a link there on the right-hand side. So if you're in Rome, I think it's about the middle of next week. I think it might be Tuesday or Wednesday next week. If you're in Rome, then come along and we'll have one last event. I was hoping to catch up with the Monaco CERN. It's Monaco or Monaco? I'm still not sure. The CERN here as well. It turns out that today and tomorrow, like the 2 days we had here, actually yesterday and today, Friday, yeah. Yesterday we got here and today are public holidays or days off or something to that effect. So unfortunately that won't work, but we are keeping entertained. Okay, next thing, 16 billion records. I'm going to pop this one open because this wasn't the best time to have this happen while I was on holidays. Now, since Stefan's here as well, we can talk about this together, but we did have a fractionally small outage on Have I Been Pwned yesterday. And it was kind of a weird one because DDoS or malicious traffic aimed at you is in many ways hard to distinguish from popularity. Now, what I mean by that is that we suddenly started getting some alerts around about this time yesterday, 24 hours ago. And we started getting alerts that there were some unhandled exceptions, and it was the database timing out. Now, Stefan wrote a great blog post at one stage about how we do, and it's actually, I need to make you a mod on my channel, Stefan, so you can drop links in, but other people can't drop links in. But anyway, Stefan wrote this great story about how do we scale SQL Azure Hyperscale in response to traffic. So he's effectively built our own autoscale implementation. And inevitably what happened yesterday is we suddenly started getting a lot of requests that hit the database and required scale. And our initial thought was that someone had found a bypass to send a lot of post requests to the homepage. Now, I won't get into that whole space, but if you want to see what goes on, try and make a post request to the homepage and you'll see that you'll get a Cloudflare challenge, which you have to pass. But we're getting all these requests and we're like, what's going on? So it's like, is the Cloudflare challenge broken? But after a bit of digging around, we found that we were just getting smashed with organic traffic. And it kind of took a while to work out what had happened. And then we drew the conclusion that this story about 16 billion passwords exposed and record-breaking data breach, opening access to Facebook, Google, Apple, and any other imaginable service. I'll come back to that headline in a moment. Was the thing that had been picked up by a lot of press and was driving a lot of people to Have I Been Pwned. Now, Quick Database Scale has fixed that. We've made a few other tweaks since, which we think are going to stop that from happening again, we hope. But this story has had massive traction. Now, I'll be honest, every single time I see a news story with a very, very large number of breached accounts, I am instantly suspicious. And I'm instantly suspicious because we've seen things like the previous headlines have been the mother of all data breaches, you know, like some huge ginormous number that we've never seen before. And again, I get smashed by requests. And ultimately, a lot of it turns out to be recycled data. So I was very hesitant when I first saw this, but it sort of got to the point where it's something I couldn't ignore, not just because it was causing errors on our website, but a lot of people were tagging me on social, a lot of press reaching out. I even had press back home in Australia going, can you come and do a TV thing? I'm like, no, because I'm here. There's obviously a lot of interest. So I'll explain what's happened here. Cyber News has broken this story. The key takeaways. Now, the key takeaways actually dispel, I guess, my initial feelings about this. So when I see a headline like that, I'm like, this is going to be reused stuff that we've seen all over the place before. Someone's packaged it up and they've just gone, hey, here's a new thing. Now, in their headlines, they do, I'm trying to listen to what supercar that is out the window. They do say, the records are scattered across 30 different databases, and some records are or might be overlapping. All right, well, that's probably an important point. The data is recent, not merely recycled from old breaches. And then the other points, I'll just read them. The other points are the largest data breach in history involves 16 billion login credentials. Cyber criminals now have unprecedented access to personal credentials and could exploit them for account takeover, identity theft, and targeted phishing attacks. And that does make me feel a bit uncomfortable. Now, maybe the next thing I've just noticed here helps partly explain this. When I'm at home and I use the Pi-hole for my DNS resolution so that it immediately bins requests to any domains that are effectively serving ads, life is great. When I travel and I'm not using the Pi-hole, I see a lot of ads. And immediately under the key takeaways for this story, which has obviously gotten huge amounts of traction, is an ad about intermittent fasting according to finger length. So if your ring finger is longer than your index finger, that is one form of intermittent fasting. If your index finger is longer than your ring finger, that's another one. If both index and ring finger are of the same... Oh, now it's gone, and now I've got the Mediterranean diet plan. So, like, read between the lines. When I see something get so much traction, and it's got ads like this in it. But, that said, what I will say as I spin down through here, there is a reference somewhere in here to Bob Dychenko. Now, Bob has been a very reliable source for data before. He's certainly someone I've had many conversations with. I trust him as a professional, and I have had a bit of a chat with Bob, and we'll see where that goes. But I would like to see that 16 billion headline and figure out, firstly, how many unique email addresses are in there, because that's a much better representation of how many people are impacted. And it's not 16 billion, obviously. That would be impossible. Then, I'd also like to know, how many of these records have we already seen before? How many are already in Have I Been Pwned? How many of them are things that are, to one extent or another, effectively just recycled? So, I'd like to know that. I'm hoping we can work that out. So I'm going to keep having that chat with Bob. He has been rather busy, as you would expect after a story like this. But yeah, look, it's a great headline, but as best I can tell, we're talking about stealer logs that have come from all different sources. The headlines that I've seen in both this story and other stories around sort of Apple, Google, Microsoft, etc., seem to be more representative of the fact that it's just a large number of InfoStealer logs, and of course people log into all sorts of different things. So the reality will not be as serious as what the headlines represent. I'm just not sure whether it's like 50% as serious or 0.5% as serious. And I suspect it's going to be a little bit more towards the latter than the former, but the truth will be in the data and we'll see. One of the things I find a little bit odd about this, just read this paragraph before the table. None of the exposed data sets were reported previously, bar one. In late May, Wired magazine reported security researchers discovering a mysterious database of 184 million records. I think I know what that is as well. We're dealing with that one as well. It barely scratches the top 20 of what the team discovered. Most worryingly, researchers claim new massive data sets emerge every few weeks, signaling how prevalent infostealer malware truly is. The names are just very, we've got these sort of 30 names here. They're things like TMF, big data dash index, users, well, that narrows it down, CSV underscore data, logs, leaks, B2B. Yeah, I don't know. It's not clean, I think is the way that we'd put that. It's not like, here is a data breach of a specific service. The data has all come from there. It's attributable back to that source. It's verifiable. This is not that. So look at the comments here. Richard says, people's reflex when a news story about a breach happening is to go to have it been pwned. Seems like a good problem. There's a funny thing, mate. It is a good problem that, even though I don't even know if Have I Been Pwned has been mentioned in these things, it must have been linked into somewhere. We did look for referrers and we couldn't find much, but there might have been a referrer policy on the sites. But would that make, anyway, I don't know. It's good. I think it's more me just lamenting that things need to be toned down just a little bit in terms of the real world impact of these things. Kieran says, Independent UK and Forbes, not the best resources. So Forbes was where I first saw it. I would agree with you. I would probably take Forbes with a little bit of grain of salt. Apparently it was on the Independent as well, so there you go. Stefan, how big a portion is recent? Is it 90% repackaged? And then someone just added a couple of combo lists and called it new. Very recently, I feel like it was just before I left home, so let's call it a couple of weeks ago, a journalist contacted me about some other massive list, and I was trying to go back and find the tweet that I'd made when another one of these, like mother of all massive tens of billions of things, popped up. And I'd said something to the effect of, why don't I just create the biggest one ever? I'll just take everything that's in there and I'll copy and I'll paste, and then on the one that I paste, I'll add one to like every single password or something, and then that will be the biggest one ever, and then I can get really big headlines. It's just, yeah, okay. Press is press, I guess. That's what they do. It's hyperbolic. Daily says, there are online services hosting DNS with ad blocking. Yes, I'm aware of that. In fact, the EU has recently announced launching a whole bunch of different online DNS-based services. You can choose the one you want depending on whether you want to block ads or porn, or ads and porn, and all sorts of other things. So yes, there are those services around. If I'm honest, Dale, I also find it kind of interesting just to see what is the internet like without this stuff. It doesn't particularly stop me from doing what I need to do, but it is a good reminder of like, this is the unfiltered internet. Stefan says, the ZDNet article I sent you earlier has a link to Have I Been Pwned. All right, so that was probably as Stefan and I were trying to figure out what the hell was going on with our traffic. One of the things that made it really interesting is, and we've written about this before, but every time we load a data breach, we flush out all of this cache at Cloudflare. And then we start rebuilding a cache, which is effectively the SHA-1 hash of every email address with the key that is the first 6 characters of that SHA-1 hash. And we do that because that drives the k-anonymity model that the likes of Firefox Monitor and 1Password use. And we effectively then take every single public search and we hit that public cache. And that's what happens when you're on the front page of Have I Been Pwned. You click search, you can see it in your DevTools. It hits a unified search API. That unified search goes and grabs it from cache such that it never hits our origin. I've talked a bit about Turnstile recently with Cloudflare and our work around anti-automation. And I won't go into some of the detail because a bit of this is literally like, let's not disclose some of the things we're doing so that people don't try and figure out how to circumvent that. But the bit we can disclose, because you can see it in your dev tools, is that if the client can't pass the turnstile challenge and effectively prove that they're human, then what will happen is the page will then do a full page postback. You'll literally see a post to the root of the website. And that postback is then protected by an interstitial Cloudflare page that then has their interactive Cloudflare turnstile model on it. So you literally have to check the box to prove you're not a robot. That, I'm confident, is highly robust, which means that if anyone's trying to hammer our API, it'll effectively fail, and then if whatever client they're using can behave like a browser, it will fall back to full postback, and then they won't be able to pass the challenge. And the thing is that when we do a post to the home page, it is hitting the database each time. It's not going to the Cloudflare cache. Now, I wonder, Stefan, if there's an opportunity there. But it should only be a really, really small percentage of the time, because it should just be the clients that don't pass the Cloudflare challenge. That's the thing that gave us the uptick of traffic yesterday. Because if we say, for the sake of argument, that 10% of all visitors who do a search on the home page don't pass the Cloudflare challenge, 10% of a normal traffic load is nothing. 10% of traffic that suddenly increased 100-fold is suddenly significant. And that's what kind of nuked the database for a bit. Now, the last fun thing, since Stefan's here, I've spoken before about how much I love preparing quotes and formal documents. I can't even do it. Lots of organisations want a quote before they will go and purchase anything, which is effectively take what is already on the website and put it in a PDF with their name on it, and that makes them happy. So we've been working on automating the quoting system for some time, because at the moment Charlotte just does it manually. Someone logs a ticket and she has to go into Stripe and manually create a PDF that has the quote and send it to the potential customer, and then they decide whether they want it or not, and it's stupid and painful. So we've been working on this quote model where you can generate your own quotes for quite some time. I just saw the word bean. So Christopher says, makes the bean counters happy, not the IT department. Well, yes, yeah, you're spot on, mate. It's, and even then, I don't know why. I often feel tempted to tell people, tell you what, print it, print to PDF, and then edit the PDF and put whatever you want there. Make up a quote number, put a GUID in there for all I care. None of it means anything. It's just like internal bullshit for you guys to deal with, so that you can go and buy something that exists already. All you've done is just waste everyone's time. That's what I really think about that. Anyway, so we've now built this model. Charlotte and I have been testing it today. We had a few little tweaks and feedback. I suspect that once we launch it, and I think we're at minimum viable product now, Steph, and I think that last little bit of feedback, once that's through, that might be the last Friday job. Let's just push that into production, soft launch it, just see what happens the next few days, and then we'll start to update documentation and stuff next week. But that should now, to use Christopher's term, satisfy the bean counters where they can go and generate this stuff themselves. Now, in case you're thinking quotes sound like an easy thing, they can be, but they're not. So here are some of the reasons why they're not easy. When we create a quote, we need to, for example, know the jurisdiction of the individual, because if they're in Europe and they're not a registered business, we need to add VAT. If they're in Australia and they're a registered business, we need to add GST. If they're in Europe and they are a registered business, you can do a reverse charge, but we have to collect their VAT number. So we have to get all of that. We have to know the jurisdiction. The other thing is that due to the mechanisms of Stripe, at the moment, if you want to take out a subscription with Stripe or via Stripe, the whole thing effectively transfers you over to Stripe. You start and have it been pwned, you're like, yep, I want to buy this thing, and let's say it's pwned one at $4.50 for a month. And you click purchase and you go over to Stripe and you enter all of your information in Stripe, and that's your experience. They do not have a dashboard model for doing that for quotes. So we have to now collect all of the information we would have collected for quotes on the Have I Been Pwned site. Now that is the company name. That's going to be things like the address, obviously the VAT information I just mentioned before. All of that has to come from there, which we can do, but it means that we have to create the interface. And then we have to get all that and we have to pass it to Stripe's API, and then Stripe creates a quote. Now, to pay the quote has to be converted into a subscription. So bam, as soon as you accept the quote, it now begins. And then it also, as the subscription is created, it creates the invoice. So now you've got to have the invoice, ambulance or something. There's police everywhere here as well, loads of police. Apparently they are very, very serious about speed and noise of cars. I was watching a popular YouTuber the other day, and literally as he was down here in the square, a very nice sounding Lamborghini went past and got pulled over because it was too loud, just for doing like normal Lambo stuff. Anyway, quotes. So we have to start the subscription when you accept the quote, because that's the thing that generates the invoice. And then we also have to do stuff like, this is one of the ones that's the most painful. And I imagine, Steph, and you haven't said this exactly, but I imagine you're probably reading the response to Charlotte and I gave you, and you're like, why on earth would it work like this? A lot of companies, because of the Nevilles in the accounting department, when, let's say they take out an annual subscription, as the annual subscription is coming up for renewal, they want a quote to renew the subscription. Now, I've already established how I feel about quotes, but you know, we have to support that. So they want a quote. So they've had this thing, it's been running, they now want a quote. In Stripe, there is no construct to create a quote for an upcoming renewal of a subscription. So what we can do is we can create a quote, but were you to accept that quote, it would create a new subscription. And then that subscription would be separate to the other subscription that is currently running. So we had to get to the point where it's like, you can create a quote, if you have a subscription already, you can create a quote, but you can never accept the quote. Because if you accepted the quote, that would create a new subscription, that would create a new invoice. And now we've been doing this manually already for the last couple of years. So I don't think we're going to have a problem with the fact that this is the way it now works. But now the UI literally has to sort of say, you've already got an active subscription, here's your quote. You can't accept the quote, but you can download the PDF and you can give it to Neville, and hopefully he'll be happy. And that's where we're at. So anyway, I'm going to wind it up there, and in a week from now we can talk about how successful or not the entire quoting mechanism was. Anyway, right, I'm going to head off. We're going to go and do a nice dinner. Going to go look at some supercars. Going to get more photos. Going to post on Facebook. If you want to follow the Facebook stuff, again, I post pretty much everything on Facebook publicly. On my blog, there's a Facebook link. All the stuff's there. I'm trying to post the things I can to the various other social channels, but if I'm completely honest, it's a fragmented landscape. I've started using Buffer. This was on your recommendation, Richard. Buffer to post to a whole bunch of channels at once. X is just weird because Elon, Mastodon is just a small portion of the population that used to be there on X, and they're normally just angry because I've tweeted a sponsor or something like that. Blue Sky seems to want to be successful, but then that has a very strong political leaning in the other direction to some of the other platforms, and it's just a little bit messy. But anyway, I'm trying them all, and then we'll just see what happens later on. Maybe something else will come along and surpass them all. All right. Thanks, folks. I'll catch you. I'm not sure where I'll be next week. I'm going to be somewhere in Italy. See you then.